Jupiter says, in a hyper Bitcoinized world, what does the steady state look like? Will everything be denominated in sats? This is something I think about all the time, and I try to play this out in my head of how that could be. What do you guys think on that?
I think, yeah, that's what's going to happen. There's this concept and idea of the broken ruler, and that we measure everything in USD. Everything is like paired to US dollars, but the US dollar inflates randomly. We have no idea how much there is actually in circulation. We really have no idea what it's worth. It's like measuring, it's like measuring a mile with a ruler that constantly changes. You're really, it's impossible to do. So that's the idea of the broken ruler. With Bitcoin, we know the max supply, we know the issuance, right? People say, oh, Bitcoin's deflationary. It's actually still inflating. Because there's more of it getting released every single 10 minutes. We just know exactly how much. It's very transparent in its issuance. And with all of that information, it makes it much easier to use that as the denominator and to actually calculate the worth of everything else against this 21 million max supply unit. So I think, yeah, everything gets denominated in Satoshis, or maybe even millisatoshis if we need to, make it more divisible at that point. And yeah, everything just begins to start to make sense.
Yeah, over time, I think there's no reason for why would anybody want dollars if they understand Bitcoin? I think that's the question. If you could get Bitcoin and that's what you want, the money is supposed to be the thing that most people want, right? Everybody wants money. Everybody wants US dollars. Not everybody wants, let's say, the computer that I have. Not everybody wants my microphone. Not everybody wants the hat that you're wearing, sure. But everybody wants Bitcoin. Right. That's true. That's true. Everybody does want that. But everybody, more people want Bitcoin than your hat, right?
Yeah, true.
You can find anybody on earth who can find some use for Bitcoin. So isn't that what money is supposed to be? Isn't it supposed to be the most easily exchanged good or service? If you can go anywhere in the world and they can provide you with any service, and and you can pay them in Bitcoin, that's the world where we're going to, right? And so that question, in a hyper Bitcoinized world, what does the steady state look like? Everything is going to be in Bitcoin. The price of everything is going to decrease forever. We're going to see the price of Bitcoin determined based on other things instead of dollars. I think the dollar won't exist. I don't think. Why would we want pieces of paper to value things? I think it goes right back to that, right? Why do we want these pieces of cotton to value things? Why do we need them? We don't need them anymore.
I agree.
Yeah, I think so too. The thing that I think of with this is, we hear people like Michael Saylor, who's kind of the voice of Bitcoin right now. We hear people like Donald Trump, who's one of the most influential people, if not the most influential person on the planet. They've been saying never sell your Bitcoin. And this is kind of maybe just a conspiracy theory, but do you guys think that there's any them pushing people in that direction? Obviously, Saylor talks about Bitcoin being capital much more than a currency. Do you guys think that there's any sort of personal reasons for the US wanting to remain the dominant player in this and saying, never sell your Bitcoin? Because if everybody has that kind of ingrained into their minds, just like death and taxes and all these other BS things the government has propagandized through the years, is that something that says, okay, well, buy Bitcoin, which is going to back our currency, never sell it, but use our dollar? That's kind of what, again, this is just me thinking out loud, but that is a likely, possibility behind the scenes of why this is, kind of playing out as it is.
Yeah. I think you're right on. I think that they can see that maybe their control over currency is waning. So they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we control this thing that we have zero actual control over it? It's kind of like the Fed, right? Like the Federal Reserve, everybody hangs on to every word that guy says, Jerome Powell. They care so much about what he does with the interest rates, but most of what he does that's important is what he says, because it's all signaling. If he says, oh, inflation is coming, that's going to cause a bunch of people to spend money, to get rid of their money, to buy assets, and that's actually going to cause inflation. So what he says becomes reality because people listen to him. So it's kind of like that with the Bitcoin and with the dominance of the dollar and all of this. If they can back the US dollar, say the US dollar gets backed by Bitcoin, if they still have the control of being able to mint dollars, even if it's backed by Bitcoin, and people use those as the payment system, they can still apply some sort of form of capital controls. They can stop payments, they could freeze accounts, all of this. Whereas if somebody just held cold storage Bitcoin and actually used on-chain Bitcoin, or even ran their own Lightning node, or something like this, they can, with open source software, you can participate in this alternate monetary network and payment system and have zero people controlling what you do. So I think they're trying to find that middle ground where they still have some semblance of control, and they can do that by accepting Bitcoin, but framing it in this way of, oh, this is just capital. This isn't currency. This is just capital. Use this as currency instead. And we control that.
And I agree with you. I think that's actually 100% true. And then on top of that, I think that they don't want to have to pay people in Bitcoin because there's a finite number, right? So let's say, for example, if they start saying, oh, Bitcoin is currency, and people start asking for Bitcoin in their paycheck, then where are these companies going to get that Bitcoin from? They're going to have to buy Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is going to have to pay its employees in Bitcoin. Let's say Donald Trump starts saying that Bitcoin is currency. They're going to have to start paying their employees in Bitcoin. The federal employees are going to have to be paid in Bitcoin. So, I mean, it just feels like I think the end goal of wealthy people is to keep the wealth with them. That the end goal is to make sure that they can keep their assets forever. They don't want to sell their assets. I think that's one of the problems as well. When you see people saying, oh, there's no cash flow, it's because they don't want to sell some of their Bitcoin. They don't see Bitcoin as a savings account. They just see it as another asset. They don't see Bitcoin as the cash. Bitcoin is the cash. Cash doesn't create cash flow. Assets, no, not even assets. Businesses create cash flow. Yeah. Real estate is not an asset. It's a business. Sorry, real estate is not a savings tool. It's a business. And a lot of people have been brainwashed to believe that Bitcoin is a savings tool. So what they say is, I want my real estate for the cash flow. But no, you don't want the real estate for the cash flow. You want the real estate as because you've been brainwashed to believe that real estate is a cash flowing asset. And then on top of that, some people are willing to take a loss on their rental properties with the rent that they're getting because they know for a fact that the price of the asset is going to go up over time. So I think that, again, that ties into this. They want to be able to delay gratification and get instant gratification at the same time. So they want to be able to use their Bitcoin to continue to get wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. And then they want other people to accept pieces of paper, because that way they can create more and they can keep spending and spending and spending forever.
Yeah. And I think also one thing to put there is, like, if we were to use their payment system, if we're using their dollars, if they're digital or not, if they say they're backed one-to-one, are they actually? Like, I think the amount of ability to create like paper Bitcoin or like assets that are backed by paper Bitcoin, I think they're going to take as many opportunities as they can to do that without breaking absolute trust, because that's what they've done throughout history, throughout fiat history. There's, fractional reserve banking is a complete example of this, to just create more dollars when they don't actually exist. Not that dollars back anything anyway, right? So it doesn't really matter in this case, but if it's supposed to be backed by Bitcoin, then it really does create a problem. And yeah, so I think that, again, there's nothing better that you can hold, in my opinion, than actual Bitcoin that you can verify is Bitcoin, because there's going to be a lot of Bitcoin derivative things that you actually have no idea if it's really connected to Bitcoin.
True. Yeah. To me, I think that there's, within Bitcoin and within the whole government system right now, like this is something I'm really torn between myself is, you see people say, like, I thought Bitcoiners were all about separating money from state. Why do you want the government to hold Bitcoin? And of course, there's a part of me who's like, if the government buys Bitcoin, that's going to be a long-term holder. That's going to increase my net worth selfishly. But the other part of that too is that it's different than the government holding Bitcoin is different than the government being able to print Bitcoin and create Bitcoin. Those are two different things. And so when we're talking about stable coins and governments holding Bitcoin and backing their currency with Bitcoin, that's another way where they could create currency from Bitcoin without showing proof of reserve. So I think until we standardize and normalize proof of reserves, paper Bitcoin is going to continue forever, and it's probably just going to ramp up. That's kind of my opinion on this whole thing. And I think governments see this as something that they, even though they can't print Bitcoin, they can create things on top of Bitcoin that they can create more of, and essentially create the illusion that, yes, this is backed by Bitcoin.